The Long Walk is a thriller taking place in a fictional dystopian version of the United States. It follows Raymond Garrity, played by Cooper Hoffman. He's a young man representing his state in an annual walking contest where each contestant must maintain a speed of 3 miles per hour. Any contestant who falls behind gets executed, and it ends when one person remains. Garrity becomes friends with some of the other contestants. Despite their grim circumstances, they form a bond and try to support each other as they face their inevitable fate. So this movie is an adaptation of the Stephen King novel by the same name. This is actually the third Stephen King movie to come out this year, alongside The Life of Chuck and The Monkey. The clipboard guy at the screening told us that Stephen King actually wrote it under his old pseudonym while he was still just a senior in high school. That tracks because this movie is obviously very symbolic. On the surface, it's about a race to the death, but underneath there's a lot of commentary about society and its structures, and one of those pieces of commentary was very relevant at that time. There's a few we will dig into, but the big one there that is likely what sparked Stephen King's inspiration to create this story is the commentary about war, or to be more specific, the military draft. The movie highlights the murky practice of sending young men overseas to put their lives on the line regardless of whether or not they support the cause. King wrote this book as a young boy during the heights of the Vietnam War, channeling the fear and the tension of a generation of boys who could be shipped off overseas to fight and die in a conflict they never chose. It's obviously not a rock-solid allegory because in this movie they have the option not to race, but nevertheless the writing is on the walls with the parallels of military culture and the normalization of human sacrifice. Adapting this for the screen, they even raised the age requirement to participate in the Long Walk, not just to account for the gruesome nature, but also to more closely align it with the draft. But the Long Walk also obviously just represents societal expectations. It shows a group of boys whose lives have been reduced to empty cogs in the machine. Like many ordinary working class people, they are pressured by society to keep moving forward. They can either keep trudging forward chasing success, or they can fall behind and become failures. Staying focused on the end goal is obviously very important, but this movie sheds light on how grinding endlessly without slowing down can corrode a person over time, both physically and mentally. Life requires rest. By depicting characters who are slowly destroyed by the Long Walk, the movie shows us what can happen when we neglect our health and well-being in pursuit of success. And then lastly, the movie just paints a solid picture of the importance of momentary connection. What makes the journey worth enduring in the end are the connections we build along the way. We may get worn down in our steady march, but we also learn and grow, and we form relationships with the people moving forward beside us. This movie is about the here and now. It shows us that the little things we can create and find along the way are what make the whole journey bearable, as opposed to constantly fixating on the things much further ahead. So on the surface, the thing that carries this movie is the camaraderie. Garrity very quickly forms a bond with some of the other contestants, and their exchanges are where this movie entertains. In typical young boy fashion, the main group of boys is pretty noisy and silly. They're very chatty, and they make plenty of raunchy jokes, and they like to playfully poke fun at each other. But they're also very supportive toward one another, especially Pete, played by David Johnson, who is really the heart and soul of the movie. When other characters reach their breaking points, he becomes a tether for their sanity. It's interesting how the main group unifies despite being opponents, while some of the other contestants behave how you would expect, either minding their own business or antagonizing others. These guys show nothing but love to each other. It reflects how when the future is uncertain and death seems imminent, people cling to those around them as a source of strength. This is of course what leads to some of the more heavy emotions in the movie. Because spoiler alert, they don't all find a way out of the race and open a frozen yogurt shop together. People die, and it's sometimes pretty heavy. It's weighted by the fact that these guys have formed a very special bond in such a hopeless situation, and the ways that they go out range anywhere between mildly shocking all the way to rip your heart out territory. The conversations leading up to some of the deaths are very powerful, even for the characters who you knew early on would get killed. They go out in ways that really hit you. Just watching these kids become physically exhausted is one thing, but the ways they also mentally unravel and the horrible states some of them end up in is just sad. I did not cry watching this movie because it was a packed XL screening, and honestly, even though I know it's fine, the more people who are around, the less likely I am to cry in movies, but I will say that I got the urge to a few times. The overall emotional buildup moves slowly but organically. You slowly watch the dynamics shift from being more rowdy and silly to being more open and vulnerable, and by the halfway point, the movie just really ropes you in. The score also really helps with that because the music also evolves throughout the movie, and the very sad music that accompanies these characters in the moments before their deaths makes it so much more tragic. And the deaths, man. This movie is very graphic. I knew that this movie would have blood and gore, but it was much more gruesome than I was expecting. There's a pretty large contrast between the moment leading up to the first death and how hard it actually hits you. It leaves you going, all right, here we go, we're getting started, time for the first death, and... dude. It was among two very high shock value deaths that hit you like a sledgehammer. And while many of them we kind of just skim right past because there's 50 of them and, they can't all get the same level of attention, the ones that get the proper spotlight hit you really hard. As for things that were not super spectacular, the first thing that comes to mind is the movie's visuals. While the rural scenery with the pseudo-bleach bypass look and the vintage color grade is really punchy and looks great, there just wasn't much done with the cinematography to enhance the story visually. Obviously, with the movie taking place entirely on the same trek, there's not really a whole lot you can do with the camera to keep things interesting. But sometimes the medium shots with two characters talking on screen lingered a little bit too long, and characters' feelings likely could have been felt a bit more intimately by switching to an over-the-shoulder shot or really just changing the angle at all. Even the shots of the camera staying on one character with the other falling behind and out of focus to their execution, while very dramatic, was played out a few too many times. This did not ruin the movie by any means, but it could have been given more thought, especially from a director like Francis Lawrence, who has plenty of experience adapting dystopian stories for the screen. While he generally has a good eye for bringing the world building of a book to the screen, he is definitely not always the best at directing actors. I mean, this is the guy who directed most of the Hunger Games movies. Sometimes this movie cuts back and forth between characters during exchanges, and the flow just doesn't really feel cohesive, almost like they're coming from two different scenes with two different tones. There's a couple times where Garrity's distress sporadically goes from 0 to 100 in a split second, despite the fact that nobody really said anything triggering. I know that the counter argument is to say that these characters are under pressure and it can break them at any moment, but these couple of instances, the conflict felt forced and like it could have just been ramped into more seamlessly. And sometimes situations feel a little bit stiff, like Garrity has this pivotal flashback scene later on in the movie, and it just felt really rushed and hollow despite having some very heavy subject matter. Francis Lawrence does, however, do a good job of honoring the sentiment of King's work by leaning into the symbolism of his work as much as he can, even with visual metaphors, and it culminates with a great ending. Though the movie wasn't a total knockout, the good very much outweighs the little things that were not perfect, making it well worth a watch. So overall, this movie was pretty good. It is very powerful and well worth an evening ticket price. If you're looking to watch something poignant and heavy, this will certainly deliver. But bear in mind that this is rated R and it does not pull punches on the graphic material. If you have a hard time watching movies with blood and gore, this might be a hard watch. Thank you for watching this video. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you next week with my review of Twinless.